Hi everyone, welcome to the 25th Annual Wilde Awards. Thank you for joining us as we hear from Susie Wilde, children's book reviewer for the Raleigh News and Observer, as she presents her selections for the best children's and young adult books of 2021. By clicking on the green button down below, you can shop Susie's list. I have also pasted a link in the chat. If you would like to honor Susie and her long career celebrating the best of children's literature, consider supporting Flyleaf's Holiday House book drive by purchasing a book in Susie's honor. Flyleaf is supporting the Junior League's Christmas House, which will distribute holiday gifts to local Orange County families in need. Books purchased prior to December 5th, 2021 will be included in this year's distribution, and books purchased after this date, December 5th, will be included in next year's distribution. There is a particular need for books for older readers, ages 11 to 15. All books ordered from the wishlist for the book drive will receive a 15% discount applied manually before your card is charged. Again, that is for the book drive books. And now I will let Susie take it away and show us her top picks for the year. Thanks.
Thank you, Marilla. Okay, so I am here accompanied by some unseen people who are going to help me. I have somebody here who is going to read the titles of the categories, and then I will start going for it.
Books for babies and toddlers.
Okay, one of the first books I want to show you is Karen Katz's Kisses Head to Toe. One of the things that I've always loved about Karen Katz is that she does a lot of multicultural books. She also has really sturdy flaps. She also has playful interaction. This one is Kisses Head to Toe, and it starts out with the kisses coming from the head, from the top. First, you go to the top and kiss baby's head, and it goes all the way to the bottom where you kiss baby's toes, and then you can start all over again. Personal story. I sent this to my new grandson, who is 5 months old. Is that right? 4 or 5 months old. And his sister stole it, and she took it up to her bedroom, and it hasn't been seen downstairs yet. So she recommends it. She also recommended Num Num Num. And I love books that have longevity. This starts with a rhyme. Little kitty looks very hungry, and what does she want to eat? A bowl of milk, waffles or pancakes, tiny mouse cookies, or catnip milkshake. Which would you choose? So again, it's got that interaction. I'm sorry, it has rhythm, not rhyme. And then it ends where you lift the flap and have num num num. This is a place where parents can get dramatic and playful. This is a place where a child will probably start at a young age choosing their own favorite food, but as they grow into the book, they will be able to really think about what would the kitty like? What would the bear like? What would the alligator like? And so it is a book with longevity. Another thing is it's a great book for a beginning reader. One of baby's favorite things is animals and animal sounds. Again, this is a very clear background, very clear picture that I will show you, that have animals. Tiger, tiger, is that you hiding in the tall bamboo? So you've got the interaction, and you've got the peekaboo kind of quality. Such stripy stripes, such sharp, sharp claws, such furry ears, such big, wide jaws. And a flap. So you get to have the animal noise, the animal naming, the rhyming. One of the things that we're doing with young children is just letting the love of words wash over them from a very early age. And this book certainly does that. Sandra Royton, consistently wonderful. This is her Jungle Night that has us putting all the animals to bed. Listen to the cheetah, cheetah. So this is a really great example of ways that parents can participate and make it as loud or fun as they want. It also has a twist ending where we get a really big wakeful snore from the elephant. And when that happens, nobody's sleeping anymore, of course. All right. So there's also, this comes with a soundtrack read by Sandra Boynton's son, who is a playwright, and also a soundtrack with Yo-Yo Ma on the cello. So there's that. This is a book called I'll Meet You in My Dreams. And it's a very dreamy book, very lyrical, very whimsical. Each evening when the sun is set, as night casts a starry net, I'll hitch a ride on moonbeams and meet you in your dreams. Adventures wait for you and me. Close your eyes and see. First, you'll be my little bumblebee. I'll feed you sips of nectar tea. We'll snuggle in a flower. So it goes on, and you get to see this child grow up and have relationships. So there's a lovely hidden story throughout, and incredible illustrations by Rafael Lopez. I've been reading long distance, which is sometimes, but not always successful. One book that was successful was One Sheep, Two Sheep. And it starts out with a rooster who's counting himself to sleep. I must count sheep. 1 sheep, 2 sheep, 3 sheep. Eep! So here's what you get, is you get the naming the animal wrongness, like, wait, that's not a sheep. What is that? So you can do animal identification and noises as these obnoxious farm animals keep busting into poor rooster's dreams. Just a lot of fun. There's counting. There's a lot to play with in this. That's our first stack.
Picture books for early schoolers, ages 4 through 8.
Okay. I wanted to start with 2 books. One is called Our Skin, A First Conversation About Race, and another book that's called Being You. That's the first book about gender. And these are just great. I mean, they're uncomfortable conversations for a lot of parents to have. And it's so, one of the greatest things about books is that you can use these as a framework to talk with. Very proud of this book. I was here when it was developed. It's called A Girl's Bill of Rights. They had 7 copies yesterday, and somebody came in and bought them all. This is the horrible, wonderful thing about a bookstore. Like, I got a list together and they sell the books. So this is a book by Amy Muka, who wrote with me for maybe 10 years, a whole decade. And this is a book that she published by a small press called Beaming Books. And it starts out, I have the right to love what I like and love what I love. I have the right to look how I look and wear what I wear and do whatever I want with my hair. All the way through, there's a lot of multicultural representation and also a lot of emotional representation. And it just has a really strong, powerful feel to it, as the feisty young girl does. Book called Something Good. It may not be, is it on your list, y'all? I don't know if anybody sees that. This is a book by Marcy Campbell, and one of the things I love about her books is she's very nuanced, very sophisticated. So this is a story that takes place in a school, and somebody writes something really terrible on the bathroom wall. We never learn what it is. Of course, the children are going to want to know, but we do get reaction. They sneak in to see the bad thing. My mouth popped open. Tanisha turned around and ran out. Kyoko kicked a stall really hard, and the sound made us cover our ears. Emmy started to cry. So we know it is really terrible. And it starts taking over the whole school. Meanness starts until it is, there's a step in from the teachers and the faculty who switch it all around. And one of the most lovely parts to me is that they cover it up with beautiful art and then write poems. So it's about repairing damage with words and art. This is a book I wasn't sure about. Bodies Are Cool. And then I had the great good fortune to get to go to the Eric Carle Museum, and they made me fall in love with this book. So it's just got wacky body types and big bodies, small bodies, dancing, playing, happy bodies. Look at all these different bodies. Bodies are cool. Okay, I've got a little bit of audience here. Y'all can help me. Lanky bodies, flat bodies, tall, short, wide, or narrow bodies, somewhere in the middle bodies.
Bodies are cool.
Right. So what's not to love about this book? One of the things I keep loving, Elise, there's so much represented in the illustrations. There's everything from hairy armpits to shaven armpits to all these different things. Elise, who works here, told me today that one of the kids in these illustrations has a feeding tube. And that was a first that she'd heard about that. So a therapist who works with kids needing that kind of help, perfect book, but it's perfect for every kid. I have a major crush on Sophie Blackall, and this is her newest book. It's called Negative Cat. On day 427 of asking for a cat, cat, my parents finally gave in. You have to feed it and clean the litter and also keep your room tidy and write to your grandma and read for 20 minutes a day. The last is the hardest thing for this guy, but he's so excited about getting a cat and he finds it and names him Max. However, Max is kind of a negative cat. He stares at the wall. He poops in the vestibule. That's probably going to be one of the favorite pages. He puts his tail in the butter. He deletes my email to grandma. And Max is just not a happy cat to have around until the main character discovers that he can woo the cat into his lap when he reads aloud. And he feels so excited about that he enlists all his friends and they all go and read aloud to the kitties. Mr. Watson's Chickens. So this is a story about two men who are very in love, Mr. Watson and Mr. Nelson, who live in a big honking house with a teeny tiny yard in a big honking city. And in that teeny tiny yard, Mr. Watson keeps 2 dogs, 3 cats, and a handful of chickens. However, he loves his chickens, they love him, but soon the chicken collection grew and grew and grew, and before they knew it, Mr. Watson had 456 chickens. So this is the kind of great illustrations. I'm sorry, can you guys see that? I hope. There are chickens everywhere in this house. There are chickens in the sink, chickens on the bed, chickens in the bread box, chickens on their heads. There are even chickens in the bathtub. So lots of fun and humor and the noise. The house shook with it. Aunt Agnes, one of the hens, made up her own song. Shooby-doo, wonky pow, baka baka in the chow chow. And she sang it all the time. So one of my favorite parts of this is just the annoyance gets to be incredible. They are a problem. Mr. Watson loved his chickens, but he loved Mr. Nelson more. Without Mr. Nelson, his heart would be a broken egg. And they come up with a wonderful solution. It's got a twist ending, too. This is a really remarkable book. It's called The Little Wooden Robot and the Log Princess. And I believe this has gone into second printing and won't be around for a while. I think this is the last book that Flyleaf has. It's got all these wonderful nods to fairy tales. Like it starts out with a king and a queen who ruled happily in their land, but they both want a child. And so the king goes to the inventor and she builds a robot. And the witch takes a log from the basket and turns it into a perfect little log princess. Everything is great, except for, of course, when the princess goes to sleep, she turned back into a log. One night, of course, what should happen, but somebody comes into the room and takes that log. So it's a great story. It's really a sibling story. So it takes everything that you love about fairy tales and kind of turns them on their heads in such a playful, fun way. The writing is fabulous.
older picture books, ages 6 to 10.
All right. Really important book when we say Black Lives Matter. I think almost all kids hear us saying Black Lives Matter. And what does that mean, really? Well, I love this author is a very lyrical writer from Australia. And what she does is goes through a lot of the moods of what it means. Darling, when we sing that Black Lives Matter, we're dancing through the streets. We're saying fear will not destroy our joy, defiance in our feet. When we whisper Black Lives Matter, we're remembering the past and the terrible things that were said and done. We're saying that they trouble our hearts. When we sob that Black Lives Matter, we're saying trouble still stalks to this day. So it's a very honest book, very truthful, very lyrical, and it's not a simple thing to understand. And I feel like this book honors the words by really describing the emotive content of all of them. Ooh, here's a sneak peek book. This is called A History of Me by Adria Theodore, and it's a book, again, this is one of my marvelous writers who finally has this book coming out, and what she's done with very, very few words is define generations of a situation. I was the only Black person in class. My mom had told me before that her great-great-grandmother on her mother's side was born enslaved, but she died young, so we didn't know much about her. And it goes through talking about all these different, about her feelings in the different situations she confronts, but also the feelings from the past. I was the only brown person in class, and we talked about the struggle for civil rights in America and Martin Luther King Jr. and marches and police dogs and water cannons. On the playground, some girls giggled and whispered and giggled some more and pointed at me and looked away when I looked at them. I wanted to slip off the swing and seep into the ground, not making a sound. And it comes all the way full circle to when she sees her daughter. My daughter was the only brown person in her class. And when they talked about slavery, when they talked about civil rights, I told her I was the only brown person in my class too. And just because no one ever mentions courage, strength, intelligence, or creativity, that doesn't mean it isn't there. So she shouldn't slide to the ground or seep into the ground. I'm sorry, slide to the floor, seep into the ground, but sit straight up and fly high into the sky because, sorry, this is the problem. This is a book that is not out yet. The pages are falling. What matters more are those moments in the mirror when she asks herself, what do I see when I look at me? And when she does, I hope she will see that she is free to be anything she wants to be. So I'm hoping that you all have the great good fortune of having a signing somewhere near you when this book comes out in the beginning of the new year. This is a quirky book. I think this is one of those metaphorical books that is kind of great to read aloud, but it's also really great for an adult that might be in your life. How to Make a Bird by Meg Hinley. To make a bird, you will need a lot of very tiny bones. They will be smaller than you might imagine. Some will be so tiny, they're barely there, and they will be hollow. These hundreds of bones, so light that when they rest in your palm, you will hardly feel them. One of the things I adore about this book is how it combines lyricism and nonfiction, some real for the bird lover in your life and for the person who's changing. So it has a child putting together a bird bit by bit. Now give your bird inside its brittle bones a heart that beats faster than any human heart, a sure, steady heart to carry it across oceans and continents all the way home at the end of a long winter. And then add the final touches, the way an artist adds her last few brush strokes, her tiny signature. Give your bird sharp eyes for hunting, a beak for building the nest, strong claws for gripping, a song to sing. But when you see it sitting cold as a statue, you will know that there is more to a bird than these things you have given it. So you will gather it into your hands and cast it gently upon the air. Those wings you so carefully made will stretch out just a little, and your bird will tremble as it fills inside its tiny racing heart with the dreams only a bird can dream of: open sky and soaring flight. Then your bird will catch your eye, and you will know it is time to go. And open the window. Open it! Set your bird upon the sill and watch while it stretches its wings and looks around with its clear, sharp eyes. See it shiver as it leans forward into the air and then takes off in a strong, sudden movement, soaring up. Away and away, never once looking back until it disappears, a tiny disappearing speck in a vast blue sky. So it really has a lot to say about life and living. Speaking of which, this is called 10 Beautiful Things, and it's about a little girl who I think has had a little bit too much living in her short life. Starts out with Lily. Lily ran her finger across the Iowa map. An X marked Graham's house on an empty patch of land, Lily's new home. This is the perfect wedding of illustration and text because you can see the worry in her face before we even get into the story. But it's evident that something really hard is happening for Lily. She turned her eyes to the window. There's nothing beautiful here, she said. She struggled to fold the map so it nestled into itself just right. You'd be surprised, Graham said. So Graham's challenge to her is to find beauty as they go. And sure enough, at that very moment, the sun broke over the long horizon. Lily gasped. There's number one, she cried. Right you are, Lily, said Graham. And as they go along, they notice things big and small that are all beautiful in their own way. And they talk about beauty. And the last thing that's beautiful is them finding each other. The Longest Let's Go Boy. I read this with a group of middle schoolers because it's got such a great point of view switch. So see if you can tell who's telling the story. Well, you might tell from the picture. Mew mew wakes me, rumble drumming my tummy. I stretch my old bones. Fireball floats across bright blue, playing hide and seek with puffers. Swirlies ruffle the fur on my upside down. Sniff, sniff. Oh boy, oh boy, oh boy, here comes Little, my forever friend. And what you find out is that that Let's Go Boy is an old dog, and they go and stop at a beautiful sun site. They sit and stay be, and all the elements around that they've always loved on their walks let the dog know that Little will be okay, that they'll be watching out for her. Among peaceful tweeter tunes, a distant Let's Go Boy drifts down from puffers. I take one last look at Little. She will be okay, and I am ready. I close my eyes and feel the flutter of beautifuls lifting me above tall sticks. Little gathers with her pack of two paws. I miss them. Dewdrops on their cheeks say they miss me too. Tall sticks lose their fur. So we got Season through his point of view. Then Cold White covers Big Wilde in a cozy blanket. So we've got seasons passing. And what we see at the end is that there is a new little pup that's going to make Little happy. This is a book called The Welcome Chair by Rosemary Wells, illustrated by Jerry Pinkney. And its beginning build is from Rosemary Wells's family. She had a relative born in Bavaria who was gifted with his hands, and yet his father wanted him to be a rabbi. So he cut his earlock and found a passage to America. And when he is in America, he works for a furniture builder and makes a chair and writes Willkommen on a panel welcoming the first baby of his employer to the world. But as this builds, you see bit after bit after bit of different people from different places and different languages being welcomed into the world. I had a very curious happening several years ago when I was doing a presentation on multicultural books. And one of the women, elder woman in the audience, asked, like, well, so where are the books that let kids know that they weren't born into slavery? Well, here's the answer. The 1619 Project, Born on Water, by Nicole Hannah Jones and Renee Watson, who's a fabulous, fabulous author, come together in explaining that. A little girl has an assignment. Who are you? Where do you come from? And the little girl tells her grandmother that she's ashamed because she doesn't know where her whole family is from. And so her grandmother tells her of the joyous beginnings that they had in a beautiful home before they were born on water. And I love how the pictures in the poems are just gorgeous. And then you see the darkness come in, but there's never total darkness because there's always brightness in this little girl's soul and the soul of her people. Okay.
Picture book nonfiction, ages 3 to 10.
Okay, how are we starting this out? I think we're starting with a couple books that are MIA, that are young books. Yeah, The Beak Book by Robin Page. Y'all see that on your list, I hope? And also Just You and Me, Remarkable Relationships in the Wild, Jennifer Ward. Robin Page and Jennifer Ward are two of the most spectacular, young writers for young children's nonfiction. And obviously the Beak Book is about, you guessed it, birds. And Remarkable Relationships in the Wild is the symbiotic relationship of animals together. So I highly recommend both those for preschoolers. Then we have Jump at the Sun, the true life tale of the unstoppable story catcher, Zora Neale Hurston. And one of the things I always look for in books is voice, a strong voice, and boy, this has it. I'm going to read you just a little bit. In a town called Eatonville, a place where magnolias smell even prettier than they look, oranges were as sweet as they were plump, and people just plain old got along, lived a girl who was attracted to tales like mosquitoes to skin. Zora was her name. Zora got to loving tales from hearing the townsfolk swap stories at Joe Clark's general store. Oftentimes, Mama sent her over to fetch a little sugar or salt, and Zora would stall, make a 10-minute errand last an hour, just to overhear tales like how that trickster Brer Rabbit always got the best of Brer Fox. Only one thing pulled her away was Mama calling, "Zora, if you don't come here, you better." I'm fond of believing everything I know I learned from the children's book. This is a beautiful telling of Nina Simone, who was born in North Carolina, as I learned. And it's got illustrations by the well-known Christian Robinson, who does a spectacular job. Whereas Cuentos, how Pura Belpré reshaped libraries. So it starts out with a young girl who grows up learning tales that her grandmother tells in Puerto Rico. Pura Belpré needs stories like a mango tree needs sunshine, like a coqui frog needs green leaves. Abuela always has a story. She tells Pura about a beautiful, beautiful Martina. She crows in the voice of Senor Gallo and quacks for Senor Pato. She tells how Perez bows low and asks Martina to marry him. Pura giggles, shivers, sighs, and she drinks up Abuela's cuentos. And when she goes to live in New York City, there's a lot of texture and a lot of noise. But when she goes to a library, she hears books being read and nobody is telling stories alive. So she both brings storytelling and also books of different cultures to these children. This is Carol Boston Weatherford's latest. It's called Unspeakable, the Tulsa Race Massacre. It begins with this refrain. Once upon a time in Tulsa, there was a community called Greenwood. Its residents descended from Black Indians, from formerly enslaved people, and from exodusters, who moved west in the late 1800s, fleeing the violence and racism of the segregated South. This is illustrated by Floyd Cooper, who very unfortunately died this year. And he we had some severe losses, and he was one of them. But this is a beautiful book that he's done with Carol Boston Weatherford, who actually lives in Greensboro, where I've moved to, and I will be finding her. And I love, there's a chorus all the way through of Once Upon a Time on Black Wall Street, Once Upon a Time this, and it feels like a fable. And then comes, of course, the horrible true story of the massacre and what happened. But the emphasis of the book is on the Once Upon a Time and what was created. Okay. Okay. So we do not have Stunt Boy in the meantime. It's the new Jason Reynolds series, but you need to know about it. It's one of those hybrids like Wimpy Kid that kids are going to go nuts for. It's a boy named Portico Reeves who lives in an apartment building, and he dubs himself Stunt Boy, the greatest hero you've never heard of. There's bullies, there's illustrations by Raoul III. It's just a really winning combination. And the other book series that's launched is Jojo Mccoons. And Jojo Mccoons is from a fictional Ojibwe tribe, and she has fire in her step. So Josephine Mccoons Azure, why is grape juice all over my bedding? Josephine Mccoons Azure, why are the toes cut out of all the new socks I bought you? Mama likes to ask me these silly questions, but I think the answer should be kind of easy to figure out. Like Tuesday, I was drinking grape juice outside the kitchen, which I'm not supposed to do. I was looking at the beaded leather jewelry Mama was working on for the summer powwow trail. When I got closer to look at it, I spilled my drink all over the table. Mama's always telling me not to get the fancy living room carpet dirty. So before the grape juice could run off the table, I mopped it up with the closest thing, her leather jewelry. And she never even thanked me for saving the carpet from grape juice, which is a very hard stain to get out. And when she goes to school, things take another interesting turn, because really they don't understand her culture in the way that they should in her school. So, for example, teacher asks us to think about a math problem. 5 people want to eat a bunch of 4 bananas. Each person can only have 1. How many people don't get a banana? I answered, everyone gets some banana. Teacher shook his head no. He said that 1 person would not get any banana. But we all share what we have, I said. That's what Native people do. So it's got a great culture woven through a feisty heroine's point of view.
Middle grade novels, ages 8 to 12.
All right. 2 amazing novels came out this year. One is called Too Bright to See, and the other one is Frankie and Bug. Too Bright to See is by an author who wrote, sorry, I've got to look up the title. When Aiden Became a Big Brother. It's a fabulous picture of a kid who is transgender and is worried about his big brother being mistaken for something that he isn't. And in this, we bumped up a level to this early nonfiction, and it stars a character named Bug, who's 11 years old and searching for a sense of self. He's also haunted by his Uncle Roddy, who's just died. Exploring his Uncle Roddy's gayness, he discovers his own transgender identity and makes peace with it. And Gail Foreman, who has written what is that title? If I Stay, and other bunches of really great young adult novels, has entered the marketplace of the middle grade marvelously. This is a story about Frankie and Bug, who are about 10 years old. And Bug is really suffering because her older brother, whom she adores, has no time for her. But luckily, Frankie comes. And Frankie is a possible mate for her to play with. Together, they start investigating the mystery of the Midnight Marauder. It's about innocence. It takes place in the 1980s during the AIDS epidemic. And Foreman is so good at seeing through Bug's eyes, that you get that innocent point of view, and how she understands that Frankie is not who he appears, and helps him make the transition to his transgender identity. Ophi's Ghost, Justina Ireland, again, another entry of a young adult author who's coming to middle grade. And this is a story of a 12-year-old who sees dead people. And the first dead person she sees is her father, who's been murdered during the Jim Crow era. Then in the horror of the South, her mother moves her to Pittsburgh, where she sees a lot more ghosts. And it's really a story of this young girl through her innocent point of view, but it's also about ghosts and social justice, all mixed together with a really wonderfully empathetic, brave character. Born Behind Bars. This is a 9-year-old who's born in a prison in India. And he's raised by his very loving mom and his aunties who adore him. But suddenly he's released. And at 9 years old, he's living on the streets. Thankfully, he runs into Ronnie, who's a homeless girl. And they search together to find his father. Has caste, religion, human slavery, water shortage, but it's all wrapped in a fast-moving plot. And again, that innocence of a boy who's never left prison and living on the streets is really amazing. Dear Hirandani, this is a book that takes place in the 1960s. The heroine is Ari. She's 11 years old. She is learning disabled, and she feels the pain of that and also of being Jewish. She's one of the few Jewish kids in her school. Well, this all comes around when her older beloved sister falls in love with Raj, and even her own family is prejudiced. One of the things I love about this book is it's told second person, which I never found an annoyance at all. In fact, I felt it really brought me into the story. This is The Last Quintesta, and it's a story of 12-year-old Petra Pena. The Earth is about to be hit by Halley's Comet, and it opens with a beautiful, beautiful story of her sad last times with her beloved grandmother, who is a storyteller. She has been fortunate, I don't know, maybe fortunate enough to, I guess, to wind up on one of 3 space shuttles going 4 centuries into the future to a planet named Sagan. And she wakes mid-time and realizes that her parents have been purged and people have been reprogrammed. There's a taking over. And it's really a story about how story can save our human nature and our humankind and the power of that. Jonathan Stroud, I don't know if y'all know him. He wrote Lockwood. He wrote Bartimaeus series, and I think we've got a new series coming out. This is called The Outlaw Scarlet and Brown, and it takes place in a futuristic London where there are creatures and bizarre things winding around, and there is a really strong young woman who is a fabulous bank robber, and the police are out after her, and she stops to rescue a young, innocent-looking boy named Brown, who is trapped in a bathroom of a blown-up bus. And they form a relationship. And when the police close in, it's not Scarlet that they want, it's Brown. And it's fascinating about their relationship and how they build it. And I'm hoping for a lot more books. Gary Schmidt, just like that. Gary Schmidt is the only author I know that writes with refrains for young adult novels, and they're so beautiful and lyrical. And even if he's taking on tough subjects, like this takes place in the 1960s, 2 characters. One is Meryl Lee, who's just lost her best friend in a car accident, and the other is Matt, who's fleeing from these horrible criminals. And they both wind up alone at a girls' school. And the thing that rescues them and this book, I think, that I love so much is a character named Dr. McNocketer. And Dr. McNocketer is a brilliant, brilliant, wise woman who cares about them deeply. And I love seeing older protagonists in a book, especially when they work this well.
Young adult novels, ages 12 and up.
Okay, I'm taking you on a cruise through history. This is Luck of the Titanic, and it's takes place after the 1882 Chinese Exclusion Act. It's a young girl who gets aboard the Titanic. She's 17 years old, and she has lost her mother, her father, and she is looking for her brother, who's the last person in her family that she knows. This has sexism, racism, classism, but a fast-moving plot, which you kind of might know the ending, but you might not. It was based on Stacy Lee, who is an incredible researcher, discovering that there were 8 young Chinese men that were aboard the Titanic. Again, everything I know I learned from a children's book. This is Sherrod Cameron's book. If you don't know her, she's written an incredible nonfiction called Light in Hidden Places. This is her newest. It takes place in post-war Germany, and it's about Eva. I love this cover because Eva's world is turning upside down. Like everything she thought she knew is turned on its head. And she travels to America to try and understand this mystery and discovers all these terrible truths about her past. Again, Cameron does amazing research that gives it a real strong anchor feeling. Last night at the Telegraph Club won the National Book Award for Young Adult Fiction. And it takes place in the 1950s, San Francisco Chinatown. The main character is 17-year-old Lily, who's always followed everything that her parents have said to do, stay close to home, but suddenly she's really just not happy. She's not like the kids in her class who want to find a boyfriend. She really wants to be a scientist like her auntie. She meets Katz. And Katz is also into interesting things, and they fall in love. So there's racism and homophobia and McCarthyism, but it's a driving plot that you can't stop reading. Angie Thomas returns to her fictional area of Garden Heights, and the main character in this is Maverick Carter, whom you may remember from The Hate You Give as the father of, what's her name? Come on. Lordy, why am I forgetting her name? The main character in The Hate You Give. It's slipped my mind for 1 second. But he was one of the greatest characters in The Hate You Give, and now he's back, and we get to see his young development as a teen who has not 1 but 2 children that he's fathered and no way of knowing how to protect them, and really does not want to do the drug culture to do that. One of the most pleasurable books I read this year was Lucy Clark Will Not Apologize. It features a young girl. Her grandmother has just died. She's at a boarding school. She's miserably unhappy. She has 2 parents who really don't care that much about her. They're much more interested in finding fame than relationship with their daughter. And she does something wrong, and it's not ever really clearly said, but she ends up going to being sent to New York to broaden herself by taking care of a crazy old demented woman, Edith Fox. Turns out Edith is not so demented, and she ends up trying to help Edith discover the person who's trying to murder her. So you've got mystery, a lot of writing about garden that's beautifully done. And it's just got a really nice, you never want to get out of this book. It'll make you sad to finish it. I met Jeff Zentner at Flyleaf years ago, and he is an incredible author, and he's continually evolving. In the Wild Light is his newest. It's got 2 characters, Cash Pruitt and Delaney Doyle. They met when they were both in like an Al-Anon program. Their mothers were both addicts, and they've been close ever since. So close that they, number 1, discovered a magical property of a growing let's see, what is that? Of a growing mold that produces miraculous results. And Delaney is so fabulously known about this, is that she's sent to a Connecticut boarding school, but she won't go without her dear friend Cash. Cash, meanwhile, doesn't want to leave his Tennessee town and doesn't want to leave his grandfather, who is not doing very well. So the tear of that, one of the things that I noticed about this book is I was 3/4 the way through and I was like, oh God, please don't let any more heartache happen. And I'm going to do spoiler alert. Sorry, y'all. But there's not heartache at the end. Everything turns out as it should. For fans that couldn't get enough of Elizabeth Acevedo and her work, new spoken word poet, Elizabeth Velasquez, When We Make It. Beautiful, beautiful poems. And they're about 14-year-old Sarah, who suffers with her mother's mental illness, poverty, feeling not seen at school, searching for food, but so beautifully lyrically written that you can enter her world and just love her, and root for her the whole way through. I will say that there is some violence in this that's a little tough to make it read. And a love story. What could be better than a love story? This is how Moon Fuentes fell in love with the universe. And what I love about it is it's not just her falling in love with Santiago, who feels less than in the world like she does, but it's also about her falling in love with herself and discovering what she can live and love in the universe and how that thing will make her love living.
Longer nonfiction, ages 12 and up.
Okay. One of the things that's been really joyous for me this year is reading books that are retelling history with an African-American point of view. So all the things hidden from me in my own growing up, I'm now learning. So it's really bringing new meaning to everything I know I learned from children's book. Marvelous author Brandy Colbert retells Blackbirds in the Sky, but she does it by providing a lot of context before she gets to the Tulsa race massacres so that it all makes sense. And I can remember reading stuff in my history as a kid where I was like, oh man, that land grab was cool. Well, no, it was not. But of course, I was raised in white privilege. Steve Schenken, who came out with a book named Bomb that made everybody fall in love. This is Fallout, Spies, Super Bombs, and the ultimate Cold War showdown. This guy can turn nonfiction into story like nobody's business. And again, I lived through this era, and yet, oh my God, I didn't know anything. I didn't know Khrushchev had an amazing sense of humor. All these things that were happening around me, and I just never knew. Run is the first book in a new series by John Lewis, which sadly he will not get to complete. It begins right after March Ends, which is a series of first 3 graphic novels. And in this book, it ends with the signing of the Voting Rights Act, March does, and this begins with his personal feeling of personal failure as Schmidt falls apart, and about how he finds triumph. Again, here's another everything I know I learned from a children's book. This is called From a Whisper to a Rallying Cry, the killing of Vincent Chin and the trial that galvanized the Asian American movement. So it takes place in 1982 when Japanese cars were on the rise. This takes place in Detroit, where there's a lot of anti-American Asian feedback. And Vincent Chin is beaten to death, and just days before his wedding, and there's a fine of $3,000 for it. His mother, of course, is incensed, and she really lights the tinder that's been waiting for a long time to get power to the to the Asian American community. Again, told a story. You just really cannot pull yourself out of this book. The Black Friend, I'm Being a Better White Person. This is Frederick Joseph. What I love about this is he mixes his personal history with and things that he discovers about how he's being misunderstood and misinterpreted, and also has interviews with people like Angie Thomas and other activists. So it's very gentle and very powerful all at the same time. I felt like I knew him when I finished, and I felt like I wanted to be a better white person. So that's it all. And I get to go back and read all your great comments.
Yeah, thank you so much for all of the book recommendations. They were lovely. And does anybody have any questions before we give a few final announcements? Oh, if
They're so overwhelmed they can't think.
They are. I am. So we're about to close out the event, and I like to end with a few reminders. You can shop Susie's list on our website, linked down below, for your family or for an Orange County family in need. And if you need any extra guides on what to get your loved ones this holiday, specifically adults, check out our holiday guides curated by our lovely staff at our website. Cool.
And this will be recorded, so it'll be on the Flyleaf website. And so many people have been so wonderful to me. It's made me really happy, and I will send you the link.
Yes, so technically it's not on our actual website. It will be up in our YouTube channel, but I'll send you the link and I'll share it all over social media.
Great. Thank you so much.
No, thank you.
Thank you all for coming.
Everyone. And actually we do have one question, and it's, how do we get the list for the books? And it's down below in the green button, and I can share the link one last time. There you go. And if you go on our social media, it's linked in our Instagram, and also on our website. You can just go over to the events calendar and click today's date to find it. Thank you.
Thank you all for coming. Hand clap of one. Yes, I love it.
100%.